The fluorescent lights of the courtroom cast a harsh glow on Maya Reynolds, her pressed navy dress uniform a stark contrast to the sterile, intimidating environment. Officer Thomas Briggs took the stand with calculated precision, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the witness stand like a weapon. Each word dripped with calculated malice. On the night of June 17th, Briggs began, his voice resonating with false authority. The defendant demonstrated extreme aggression and complete disregard for law enforcement protocols. He paused, scanning the courtroom with a practiced look of righteousness. Lieutenant Reynolds posed an immediate threat to public safety. Maya remained motionless, her dark eyes fixed on a point just beyond Briggs. To the untrained observer, she appeared calm. But those who knew her, those who had served alongside her in the most dangerous corners of the world, would recognize the controlled tension beneath her surface. Her fingers, hidden from view, were pressed against her thigh in a barely perceptible rhythm, a technique she'd learned during interrogation resistance training. The prosecutor, a rail-thin woman with razor-sharp cheekbones, nodded encouragingly at Briggs. "Could you elaborate on the defendant's behavior that night, officer?" Briggs leaned forward, his performance choreographed with the precision of a seasoned actor. "She was combative from the moment I initiated the traffic stop, refused to follow simple instructions, kept her hands in positions that suggested potential threat. Her entire demeanor was confrontational." What Briggs didn't know, what no one in this courtroom except Maya understood, was the intricate web of truth that lay beneath his carefully constructed lie. Each fabricated detail was a thread waiting to unravel, and Maya had been meticulously preparing her counterattack. Her mind flashed back to that night, the quiet street, the sudden flash of red and blue lights, the moment when a routine traffic stop transformed into something far more sinister. She remembered every detail with the crystal clarity of a trained operative, the exact angle of Briggs's approach, the tone of his first words, the subtle microaggressions that suggested this was more than a standard encounter. A soft rustle of fabric caught Maya's attention. Her lead attorney, Marcus Rodriguez, a former military prosecutor with a reputation for dismantling false narratives, was reviewing something on his tablet. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent communication honed through months of preparation. Briggs continued his testimony, each word carefully chosen to paint Maya as a dangerous, unpredictable threat. What he didn't realize was that the woman he was attempting to vilify was no ordinary defendant. She was a Navy SEAL, a woman who had navigated complex international missions, who had made split-second life-or-death decisions in environments that would break most people. This courtroom was just another mission, and Maya Reynolds was about to prove that some battles are won long before the first shot is fired. The photograph was yellowed, creased at the edges, a snapshot of a young Maya standing between her parents in a small, modest living room in Detroit. Her father, a postal worker, and her mother, a high school history teacher, had instilled in her a sense of purpose that would become the foundation of her extraordinary journey. Growing up, Maya understood early that excellence wasn't just a goal, it was a survival strategy. Every academic achievement, every athletic triumph was another brick in the wall against the systemic barriers that threatened to define her limits. Her mother would often remind her, "They'll try to write your story before you can pick up the pen, so make sure your actions become the ink." Military service wasn't just a career choice for Maya, it was a calling that burned deeper than any external expectation. The Navy SEAL training was a crucible that would test every fiber of her being. When she first arrived at the training center in Coronado, California, she was one of the few black women in her class. The looks, the whispers, the barely concealed doubts, she absorbed them all with the stoic determination that would become her trademark. Her first mentor, Chief Petty Officer James Holloway, saw something special in her. A veteran of multiple deployments, he recognized in Maya a rare combination of strategic intelligence and raw physical capability. "You're not just going to pass this training," he told her during a grueling night exercise. "You're going to redefine what it means to be a SEAL." And she did. Her first classified mission came in the volatile regions of North Africa, a high-risk extraction of crucial intelligence assets trapped behind enemy lines. While male colleagues spoke in hushed tones about the mission's complexity, Maya was already mapping out contingency plans, calculating wind speeds, terrain challenges, and potential enemy movements with mathematical precision. The mission was textbook perfect. Extraction completed with 0 casualties, critical intelligence secured. But for Maya, it was more than a successful operation, it was a statement. A declaration that she belonged not just in the room, but at the very top of her field. Each subsequent mission added layers to her reputation. A rescue operation in the treacherous mountain regions of Afghanistan, an underwater demolition task in the South China Sea, a counter-terrorism mission in the Middle East. Her file became a legend within military intelligence circles, not just as a remarkable operator, but as a strategic mind that could deconstruct and solve complex challenges with surgical precision. But with each achievement came a deeper understanding. Maya wasn't just fighting external enemies. She was battling a system that had historically marginalized voices like hers. Every mission, every achievement was both a personal victory and a collective statement. The scars she carried weren't just physical. A small shrapnel mark on her left shoulder, a thin line above her right eyebrow from a close call extraction. They were also emotional. The countless times she'd been underestimated, overlooked, challenged not on her capabilities but on her identity. Now sitting in this courtroom, facing yet another attempt to define her narrative, Maya understood that this was merely another mission. Another opportunity to demonstrate that true power isn't about suppression, but about rising, every single time. The street was quiet, almost too quiet. A residential neighborhood in the outskirts of Atlanta, lined with mature oak trees and meticulously maintained lawns. Maya's midnight blue Audi sedan moved with precision, her hands positioned perfectly at 10 and 2, every movement calculated and controlled. It was 11:43 p.m. She was returning from an advanced tactical training session, her mind still processing the day's complex scenarios. The muscle memory from years of military training made her hyper-aware of her surroundings, a habit that had saved her life more times than she could count. The first sign something was wrong was the sudden flash in her rearview mirror. Red and blue lights erupted, cutting through the darkness like a sharp blade. Officer Thomas Briggs's patrol car approached, its engine a low, menacing rumble. Maya's training kicked in immediately. She signaled, smoothly pulling to the right side of the road. Her movements were deliberate, window slightly lowered, hands visible on the steering wheel, no sudden movements. She knew the protocol better than most. Briggs approached from the passenger side, his flashlight cutting a harsh beam through the car's interior. Maya could see his silhouette, broad-shouldered, the typical stance of an officer who believed intimidation was a form of control. "License and registration," he barked, his tone already confrontational. Maya's voice was calm, professional. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my wallet, which is in my center console. I'm going to reach for it slowly with your permission." "Just do it," Briggs snapped. The interaction was a dance of tension. Maya knew every microaggression, every subtle power play. Her entire career had been navigating spaces where her competence was constantly questioned, her presence constantly challenged. Briggs's body language told a story before he spoke another word. The way he stood, the angle of his flashlight, the tension in his shoulders, this was more than a routine traffic stop. This was a predatory encounter. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked, his voice dripping with manufactured authority. Maya remained calm. "No, officer. I was maintaining the speed limit and following all traffic regulations." "Your driving seemed erratic," Briggs declared. A statement, not a question. What he didn't know was that Maya's driving was anything but erratic. As a Navy SEAL, she had navigated vehicles through some of the most challenging terrains on the planet. Her precision was legendary among her colleagues. The real story was unfolding in those moments, a power struggle disguised as a traffic stop, a system designed to control, to intimidate, to suppress. And Maya Reynolds was about to become its most formidable opponent. Systemic racism was more than an abstract concept for Maya Reynolds. It was a lived architecture of oppression that had been constructing barriers around her entire life. From her earliest memories to her current moment in the courtroom, she had been navigating a complex maze designed to limit her potential. The statistics were brutal and undeniable. Black women in law enforcement and military spaces faced a unique intersection of discrimination. Promotion rates, treatment during assignments, daily microaggressions, Each was a battlefield Maya had been fighting since she first decided to serve her country. Her military file told a story beyond mere achievements. Between the lines of commendations and mission reports were subtle hints of the challenges she'd overcome. Performance evaluations that required her to be twice as exceptional to be considered half as good. Recommendations that came with an undertone of surprise rather than pure recognition. During her SEAL training, Maya remembered the initial skepticism, the sideways glances, the whispered comments just at the edge of hearing. Can she really make it? Is she tough enough? Each doubt became fuel for her determination. She didn't just meet standards, she obliterated them. But this traffic stop with Officer Briggs represented something more insidious. It wasn't just a single incident of racial profiling. It was a systemic mechanism of control, a moment that captured the broader dynamics of power, race, and institutional bias. Research had consistently shown that Black drivers were significantly more likely to be pulled over, searched, and subjected to aggressive interactions with law enforcement. Studies from multiple academic and governmental sources revealed stark disparities. Black drivers were up to 20% more likely to be searched during traffic stops, despite being statistically less likely to possess contraband. Maya understood these numbers weren't just statistics, they were lived experiences. Each percentage point represented real human beings, individuals whose dignity was systematically eroded by a system designed to maintain a specific power structure. Her legal team had been meticulously gathering evidence, not just about this specific incident, but about Officer Briggs's broader pattern of behavior. Body camera footage, complaint records, testimony from other individuals who've had similar experiences. Each piece was a thread in a larger tapestry of institutional bias. This wasn't just about proving her innocence. This was about exposing a system that continuously criminalized Black bodies, that transformed routine interactions into potential life-threatening encounters. Maya knew that her fight was bigger than herself. It was about challenging a narrative that had been weaponized against her community for generations. The courtroom became her operational theater, and she was preparing for the most important mission of her life, dismantling a system built on prejudice, one strategic revelation at a time. The war room of Maya's legal defense was a meticulously organized command center. Spread across multiple corkboards and digital screens were fragments of evidence, each piece a potential weapon in their arsenal against Officer Briggs's fabricated narrative. Marcus Rodriguez, her lead attorney, had assembled a team that resembled a special operations unit. Former federal investigators, data analysts, and legal experts worked with the precision of a military strike team. They understood this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a systemic takedown. Body camera footage became their primary intelligence. Maya watched the recording repeatedly, her trained eye catching details others might miss. The angle of Briggs's approach, the tone of his voice, the subtle microaggressions embedded in his language, each element was a potential breach in his fabricated story. Digital forensics revealed a disturbing pattern. They began tracing Briggs's professional history, discovering a trail of similar incidents that had been systematically buried. Complaints from other Black drivers, marginalized individuals who had been silenced or ignored, started to surface. "We're not just defending you," Marcus told Maya during a strategy session. "We're building a case that exposes an entire system of institutional racism." Their investigation uncovered a network of protection. Internal police department reports showed multiple complaints against Briggs had been routinely dismissed or minimized. Fellow officers had created an informal shield, protecting each other from accountability. Maya's military intelligence training became their most powerful asset. She approached the investigation like a complex mission, breaking down the opposition's defenses, identifying vulnerabilities, and preparing a multi-pronged attack. They began collecting testimony from other victims. Each statement was carefully documented, corroborated, cross-referenced. What started as a single traffic stop incident was transforming into a comprehensive exposure of systemic bias. Digital records became their most potent weapon. Text messages, email communications, social media posts, each fragment painted a more comprehensive picture of Briggs's professional conduct. His own digital footprint was slowly becoming the primary evidence of his misconduct. Forensic experts reconstructed the night of the traffic stop with scientific precision. They analyzed traffic patterns, road conditions, and the exact sequence of events. Every detail was scrutinized, every claim tested against objective evidence. Maya understood that this was more than a legal battle. This was a strategic operation to dismantle a system built on prejudice. Each piece of evidence was a precision-guided missile, targeting the very foundation of institutional racism. The counterattack had begun, and Officer Thomas Briggs had no idea what was coming.